we have the co-chair of the Media Equality Project, Megan Barth, is back with us. Megan, good morning to you.
Good morning, Paul. Thanks for having me back on.
Yes, absolutely. I'm just generally right now, snapshot of things where we are, where we've been the last week or so, last 7 days with this Kavanaugh fiasco. What are your thoughts generally on that?
Well, generally, I do not want to live in a world where all women are to be believed. And generally, I do not want to live in a world where all men are to be believed. I want to live in a world that we've lived in since the beginning of our founding, which is that all people are presumed innocent before being presumed guilty or found guilty. And what the Democrats have done to this entire process is use women as political pawns as they continue to weaponize sexual assault allegations and reduce the severity of sexual assault down to a political weapon. And so what I've witnessed here, and I've watched, as you know, we're both political animals, and probably many of your listeners, as we all watched the trials, well, I wouldn't call the trials, the hearings, we were simply just to assume that Dr. Ford is a victim of Brett Kavanaugh. But see, here as a victim, she has the burden of proof to prove that, number one, she was a victim, and number two, by whom. So we just assume the Democrats want us to believe that Dr. Ford is the victim. Well, she hasn't proved that she was a victim of anything. We already know that she has so many holes in her story, that she told the world she didn't want to fly. She was afraid of flying. Yet we find out that she flies everywhere. She takes helicopters, she takes prop planes, she takes jets, she goes to South America, she goes to Europe, she goes to Delaware, Hawaii, you name it, Dr. Ford's been there. She also wants to say that she was a victim of sexual assault. Okay, when, where, by whom? She can't answer those questions, but she can tell you that she had one beer.
Yeah, and obviously the president made those points, and everybody started talking about, he was mocking her and everything else. And I actually think, on some of these liberal outlets, for the first time, some of their listeners might have realized, oh, wait a second. I mean, it kind of forced them to at least play. I know they were saying how outraged they were, but at least they played the truth in some of these things, saying, hey, really, she can't corroborate or these people aren't corroborating her story, and she doesn't know what house it was, but she does remember that she had one beer. So I actually think maybe that might, I think there's a lot of people waking up. I was reading a story over at Breitbart. Obviously, the polls, Republican enthusiasm now is way up because they think this is ridiculous. But Andrew Breitbart, he essentially with the high-tech lynching of Clarence Thomas, said, hey, I started to start asking questions about the double standard here. Why are the Democrats going after him? And I think a lot of other people. I've heard from people who are in rooms with Democrats saying they're so fed up, Megan, that they are going to just vote Republican straight down the ticket.
Well, yeah, I think that the Democrats believe, and the Democrats believe that not only all people are as stupid as they need us to be, but all women are as stupid as they need women to be. And I know more women, and I meet a lot of people along my travels, et cetera, that are outraged by this. And I wonder how many Andrew Breitbarts have been created from the Kavanaugh trials, like you had mentioned from the Clarence Thomas trial. The huge walkaway movement that Brandon Stroka had started months ago showed us that plenty of people from the Democrat Party were sick of the Democrats' hard shift to the left, their embrace of socialism. They're calling our money crumbs. Why do you want the crumbs back? And so I think there's another walkaway movement related to the Kavanaugh hearings. And I've talked to plenty of people in order for me to be convinced that more Americans are fair-minded. I don't know many women that would want their son, their grandson, their father, their husband, their uncle, the men in their lives dragged through the mud and destroyed in the court of public opinion without a fair trial and hearing. And for those Democrats that say, well, this isn't a criminal trial, well, it's a criminal charge. And there is no statute of limitations in Maryland. So the charges being levied against Brett Kavanaugh could be charged in a court within Montgomery County where these alleged assaults took place. And yet none of these women who have come forward with these charges have followed the proper legal procedure.
We're talking with Megan Barth, the co-chair of the Media Equality Project. You can go to the website. I'm going to throw it up on the screen here. It is MediaEqualizer.com. That's MediaEqualizer.com. And matter of fact, if you scroll down here, it's on the front page right now. Well, wait a second. I just screwed that up. On the front page right now, we have the headline, Senator Graham reveals the one thing Trump should do if Kavanaugh nomination fails. And that one thing would be just to renominate and then campaign on it. But, Megan, what do you think the vote is right now between Murkowski, Collins, and Jeff Flake? What are you hearing?
Well, I wouldn't think that McConnell would call for a vote if he didn't think he had the votes. And I think that the FBI investigation, now that it's wrapped up the investigation, the seventh background investigation into Kavanaugh, has probably proven that there is no more evidence that would persuade, or at least inhibit, rather, Judge Kavanaugh's nomination. And so from a procedural standpoint, right now it's going through the procedure towards the nomination to the vote. And I do not think that McConnell would start the procedure if he didn't believe he had the vote. We can afford to lose one Republican because we know we're not going to gain really any Democrats. Perhaps there will be Heidi Heitkamp that will come across the aisles because of her political posture right now. She's down 14 points against as an incumbent, which is unheard of. You look at Joe Manchin of West Virginia. These are still what you would, I guess, formerly call blue dog Democrats. But Joe Manchin now is not necessarily in a vulnerable position, but he's also in a red state that voted for Trump. And so you look at those Democrats in those states that Trump won. They are showing some vulnerability in the polls. They are feeling pressure from their constituents, and we might grab a couple Democrats. But I think we've got all Republicans. But if Flake flakes the last minute, like we witnessed him do last week, that's all we can lose. And then, of course, Pence would come in and break the tie.
Yeah, and I'm certainly hopeful. That you would think at this point, with President Trump and him really destroying political correctness, he is really, I think, going, by the end of his 8 years in office. I mean, I think he's going to abolish this concept just in our culture of safe spaces and everything else. He's really doing an amazing thing when it comes to standing up for free speech, and by just saying, hey, listen, it's okay to speak your mind. You don't have a right to not be offended. I talked a little bit about this in the first hour, and like you said, the bedrock principle here is also being ignored, which is that you are innocent until you are proven guilty. And, as a woman, Megan, I mean, what does this do to actual, people who have, been assaulted, who are victims of sexual assault? I mean, I was reading a story last hour, that really got into, who this Miss McLean is, who signed a letter in support of her, who is this career FBI agent that just so happened to quit after Trump won in 2016, and they were together, it looks like, when she was writing the letter to Dianne Feinstein. I mean, there's a lot more there, and you're starting to really think that the deep state was involved in this the whole time.
Yeah, you're citing an article from one of my favorite websites called The Conservative Treehouse. And they really have a good outline of Miss McLean and the relationship she has with Dr. Ford. And just the coincidence that they happen to be in Delaware at the exact same time when Dr. Ford said she had written the letter to Dianne Feinstein. But, as a woman, I have never been sexually assaulted, thank God. However, I have been sexually harassed, and to the point where I filed a complaint. And a lawsuit, and I had to be deposed. And let me tell you what, the defense lawyers did not handle me with kid gloves like Christine got handled, Christine Ford. I was forced to answer questions under oath that were uncomfortable. I was painted by the defense team to be no short less than a whore. I was accused of many things during that deposition. But at the end of the day, I had proof. I had all of the documentation. I had everything that I needed to win. And it was not the most comfortable experience I've ever been through, nor should it be, because the charges I was levying against the male, who, by the way, was also in the deposition, so I had to face my harasser, which also was not comfortable. But that is what I had to do because that is what the process requires. And to ignore that entire process and have us simply believe that all women must be believed. Well, tell that to the Duke lacrosse players.
Mm-hmm.
Tell that to the fraternity at the University of Virginia that was accused of gang rape by a liar. But first, that liar, the Jane Doe, was published in Rolling Stone magazine, and then the court of public opinion started the wheels, and they completely destroyed many of those young boys on that campus before they were found not guilty. And then, of course, tell that to the man on the Columbia College campus where he was accused of rape by a feminist martyr who strapped a mattress to her back and walked around the campus. His life was nearly destroyed until she was found out to be a liar. So, again, I don't want to live in a world where my nephew or my son or my father or my uncle will simply just be guilty in the court of public opinion because of an accusation without any shred of evidence that that accusation is valid.
Polls are now showing. We're talking with Megan Barth, co-chair of the Media Equality Project. Go to MediaEqualizer.com. Polls are now showing voter enthusiasm is now basically statistically tied in terms of Democrats and Republicans going out to vote. I think that's really good. If, in fact, the Kavanaugh confirmation happens and he goes from judge to Justice Kavanaugh, and it happens sometime Saturday, how long do you think it's going to be before the left turns violent? And I know there's already instances, but you know what I'm saying? Like, I actually think that the violent reaction that I think we all know is coming, the violent reaction is going to do even more to tell people, hey, we've got to turn out and go vote.
Yeah, I really think Dianne Feinstein did not only a disservice to Dr. Christine Ford and the rule of law, but I also think that she did a disservice to her party. She thought that she had an ace up her sleeve. If these allegations were so incredibly serious enough to thwart the nomination or have the FBI involved, why did she sit on these allegations for months? Anyone who that has an IQ above a net would see that this was nothing but a political power play at the 11th hour. And the violent left, the left is inherently violent. If you'll recall the Andrew Breitbart days when he was alive, how much hate he would receive over social media, how many protesters would show up no matter where he was. I was with him plenty of times when that happened. So I've witnessed the violent left firsthand. It will get violent. It already is getting violent. We are seeing doxing going on where Republicans are exposed their phone numbers, their addresses. We see the many women in this administration and men in this administration being confronted by these wild-eyed communist leftists. The left is very well funded and organized, and they believe they are the majority. But the radical left is not the majority. They are simply paid to scream the loudest. The Democrats will only win these midterms if Republicans don't show up. We started a PAC through Media Equality Project called Red Wave America, and you can find that on Facebook. We publish all of the results in a variety of states, including one we just published yesterday, which shows that the Senate, especially incumbent Democrats, is up for grabs. The Republicans don't only have the opportunity to keep the Senate, we have the opportunity to grow the Senate. And so this is what we must do. Red Wave America PAC already established and put up 3 billboards in Texas in order to go after Beto, otherwise known as Robert Francis O'Rourke. We're also now looking at Florida, and we will continue to target as many states as we can prior to early voting in the next 2 or 3 weeks. and we will also be a force when it comes to the 2020 election. And so, again, the Democrats truly are the minority. We witnessed that from the Electoral College sweep that Donald Trump took in 2016. And the only reason he did that is because there was a red wave. So we must have a similar red wave, and one that has actually been growing. When you look at the favorability of Republicans and this president, you look at consumer confidence and index. Again, there are more of us than there are of them. It just seems like there's more of them because they are so well funded, organized, and loud.
Yeah, and they got the media to parrot everything. Yeah, let's hope.
Right.
Let's hope for a red tsunami. I've been hearing that
Yes.
term thrown around. That's what we need.
That's exactly what we need. And like I said, the Democrats will only win if we don't show up, because we have to remember that our voter rolls across this country are filthy, dirty, meaning that the Democrats, they're like, well, we have registered 800,000 new voters. Oh, well, that's great. Number one, are they legal? Are they legally registered? And number two, are they going to show up to vote? So voter registration numbers are concerning, but that does not mean that the amount of voters registered are going to yield a win for the Democrats in the midterm election.
Megan Barth, I really appreciate you coming on. It's always great to have your insight and analysis.